Friday, we're here, 11 o'clock, a few minutes delayed. I'm going to blame Harlan this time. Hopefully he wasn't in the comments telling you guys that it was my fault, because this time it actually was his fault. So don't let him trick you guys on this one. But Friday, we're here, we're live, we're excited. We're 2 weeks and 2 days from kickoff against LSU. Excited to talk about that a little bit. Some recruiting updates that we want to talk about, some different folks that we're feeling good about, some targets for FSU down the stretch that I think we're excited about. Realignment has come and gone. Has it gone, though? No, I don't think it's gone. Just the August 15th deadline is come and gone. We'll talk about that just a little bit. What else? A little fall camp, some fall camp news, maybe some injury updates, some injury concerns that folks have had. Maybe get some people to not be so concerned about injuries, this, that, the other, all of the above. So excited to hang out. Excited to hang out for a little while. Might have a special guest. I don't know if you guys know him or not, but might have a special guest joining us today from High Top Sports. Stephen Hawley might hang out for a little bit. So pull up a chair, pull up a drink. Are you guys drinking 11 a.m. on a Friday? Hopefully your weekend is getting close to starting, and we'll get going. First time in the new studio. This is cool. Actually, I think we did a video in here yesterday on conference stuff, ACC stuff, Vote. We'll talk about that again in a minute. But this is the first live in the new studio. We are, what's up, Brad? My man, we were just talking about you backstage. We were wondering where you'd been the last few shows. We were missing you. Harlan was missing you mostly. But new studio, different mic. Does this sound good today? Different background, different lighting. Working on some signage. There is an echo. Kev says there's an echo. Harlan tells me there's no echo, but Kev says there is one. I don't know. I think it sounds good, but I can't hear it, so I just hear myself. We got some signage coming. We got a lot of stuff. We're upgrading this year. So, all right, we'll wait a couple minutes. We'll let some people get in here. Harlan, the people are saying there's an echo. Maybe if I get closer to the mic, is that better? Does that help take it out a little bit? Look at Brad. Brad coming through in the clutch. Takes both spots. Dude, Harlan says y'all are trolling, and there's no echo. Bro, that's a lot of people to be trolling right there. Let's play a super chat for Brad. There won't be an echo on that.
Fire up the war chant and plant the spear. Noles win.
Minor echo. I knew my guy Fozzie would get it right for me. I'll just get right up close to the mic. I am today, as soon as we get off here, I am going to put up some soundproofing, some paneling. That is something I'm excited about to get done today. So you guys are just going to have to put up with a minor echo today. I'll get really close to the mic, and hopefully that'll help. So, okay, let's talk a little recruiting. You guys want to start there? What do you want to start with? Maybe we'll let Brad pick because Brad donated. So shout out to Brad. But studio is lit. I'm telling you guys, I'm going to put a couple of TVs in here, and I'm just going to watch college football live for like 8 hours on Saturday. That'd be cool. My wife will hate me, but it's what we do for you guys. Recruiting first up. Is that what we want to do, Harlan? Let's do it. A lot of targets, a lot of excitement. Florida State still with the number 5 class in the country, and I don't think they're anywhere close to done. Listen, we put a pretty cool little feature in the Discord yesterday. If you guys haven't joined the Discord, you need to. A pretty cool little feature that let people vote on where they thought Florida State's recruiting targets were going. I thought that was fun. Double jointed elbows. Ryan's ridiculous. Zaquan Patterson's a name that I think a lot of people are talking about, excited about. Talk about him in just a minute. But did you see the Jamar? Okay, let's shout out Blostein real quick before we go any farther. Have you been seeing his stuff from down south? Because he's crushing it. the interviews and stuff that he's getting from these recruits, the folks in South Florida, I think it's taken their coverage to another level. And I've always thought Noles 247 was the best. But, yeah, I think that's pretty ridiculous what we've got going on over there. Okay, so I really liked his interview with Jamari Howard. I have felt good there for a while, and I continue to think that Florida State's in a really good spot for Jamari Howard, and have thought that since the end of July, since he showed up on FSU's campus as opposed to going to UF's. I think that that's a piece the Noles, if they can close, which this cycle they've done a good job of that, if they can close, I think the Noles will land Jamari Howard. I think they're in a good spot for him. I think that if they can finish up, if they can hold off UF, if they can hold off Michigan State, I think they're in a great spot there. If they're able to pull Howard and mix that with Lester and KJ, I think that is probably the best DB class in the country. But that's when the conversation around Zaquan Patterson starts. A lot of smoke there, a lot of conversation there. It seems like that's shaping up to be a Michigan, Auburn, Florida State battle. I don't hear a lot of confidence out of Miami with that one. I spoke with somebody around Miami this week, and they don't think that he's coming there, but they think that it's Auburn probably. But if you read Wiltfong yesterday, Wiltfong certainly likes us, and it seems like there is some confidence that Florida State may be bouncing around and doing some things in that recruitment. I don't necessarily know that it's a done deal. There's a lot of speculation that a decision could come in the next week or so. There's been talks about the coach down there at Chaminade wanting guys to be committed before their season. So it kind of makes sense why he would want it to be in the next week or so. I don't necessarily know that that's a done deal as far as a date goes, but I think Florida State's quietly done a good job there, and we'll kind of see what they can pull. Now, you know, I think Howard and Lester and KJ are a ridiculous class in and of themselves. If they pull in 4 top 100 defensive backs and 2 of them are top 20 defensive backs, that is, I mean, Bama's not doing that. Bama doesn't have 4, but Bama doesn't have 2 guys that are in the top 20 that are defensive backs like we have with Lester and KJ. Georgia's not doing that. Florida's not doing that as much as they like to brag on Corey Raymond. So we'll see. You got 2 down. You got 2 to go. Signing day does matter. But I feel pretty good about KJ and Charles sticking with us. But if Florida State is able, man, even if they just went 1 for 2 on Patterson and Howard, like I know we really want to go 2 for 2 there, but even if they just went 1 for 2, that DB class is ridiculous. If they go 2 for 2 there, that's absurd, absolutely absurd. And I don't remember a DB class, really many places that could flex the way that we will if we go 4 for 4 there. So Patterson maybe soon. Howard, I think in December. I think that's a long play there, but I feel really good about Jamari Howard. Chris Ewald is another name. Defensive back that's currently committed to Michigan. Shout out Blostein. He, again, crushing the coverage down there in South Florida. He mentioned that that's a target that Florida State is still continuing to push on. I still like Michigan there, especially if we pick up Patterson and Howard, but we'll see how big that DB board and room is going to be. I think that if Florida State pushes there, I think they can kind of do work. But if they have other guys committed, we'll see how big of a class they will actually take. Wiltfong also mentioned this. Artavis Jones, who we've talked about a lot. Miami commit told, I think he told Gabby that, or maybe it was Zach, but I think he told somebody he was locked in with both Florida State and Miami, which was weird with him being a Miami commit. I think Miami really feels good there, but I think Florida State's starting to feel better. We're not going to stop with the ACC news. It's still very relevant. I think that Florida State is starting to feel better and better and better about where they are with Artavis Jones. I don't necessarily know that that's imminent, but if I had to project right now, I haven't put in an official prediction or anything like that. But if you ask me right now where Artavis Jones signs, it's not like if today was signing day. If we were in December, I think I like where the Noles are at. Now, I may feel different in 2 weeks. I may feel different tomorrow. But I think the Noles are doing a good job there. I think getting him back on campus a couple of weeks ago was really big. And I'm excited to see what games he makes it to in Tallahassee this year. I think him coming to the Florida State-Miami game would be kind of obvious. I spoke with somebody about this morning, and we'll talk a little bit about the season in a minute. But if Florida State starts out 4-0, you're going to have 2 weeks before that Virginia Tech game, and you're going to be a top 2 or 3 team in the country. I would think that Virginia Tech game coming back home against another cross-division rival, well, it's not divisions anymore, but a team you don't normally play, even though Virginia Tech's not supposed to be very good, I would think that they push pretty hard to make that an 8 p.m. game. And I don't think it would be game day or anything crazy like that because I think Tech stinks. But if you're 4-0 and you're top 3 in the country and you're playing Virginia Tech at night, you've got 2 weeks to make that a big official visit weekend. Or a big visit weekend. I don't know that it'll be a lot of officials. But I think that Virginia Tech game could be a massive visit weekend. And so I'd love to see Artavis, who is close to Tallahassee, make it over for that. I'd love to see a lot of the guys that are within reasonable driving distance, Luke, Cam, guys like that, KJ, make it for that game. To me, that Virginia Tech game kind of reminds me of the Boston College game. Boston College, everybody knew we were going to beat the doors off of Boston College. They came in with a quarterback hurt and everything else, and we had already started the year, 3-0 at that point. So I don't think people were concerned there about that game, but the atmosphere, the environment, it was a sellout. It was a night game in Doak. I could see a similar happening with that Virginia Tech game this year, which I think would be a lot of fun. Now, just like Boston College, I kind of agree. That game would probably be over by half, but I think it would be really, really big for Florida State to, you got to start 4-0, you got to start 3-1 at worst to really build a lot of hype around that game. You start 4-0, you got a night game in Doak as a top 2 or 3 team in the country, you got to pull a bunch of visits there. That has to be the hype around it. The home schedule stinks. I mean, we all kind of know that the Miami game's the one in the second half of the year that I think there'll be a lot of excitement around. But if you're coming off 4-0, you've just beaten Clemson, I think you got to make that Virginia Tech game as big as possible. Booker Pickett, another defensive lineman that I think a lot of people have their eyes on, maybe another Florida State-Miami battle, some other teams in there as well. He's from about 5-10 minutes from me, right down the road. It's another one I think the Noles could do pretty well with, and we'll see. Again, somebody mentioned like how many people are we going to take, class kind of filling up. There really aren't limits anymore. I think, what are we at, 21 right now? You could probably get up to even close to 30. I don't necessarily know that they will, but they do have a lot of guys I think that are going to leave after this year. I mean, you guys know the big names that are going to be looking at the draft, and so you can process guys if needed. But, yeah, I think they'll take 26, 27, 28, somewhere in that number. So, yeah, of the guys we're mentioning, 5, 6, 7 more, somewhere in there. Booker Pickett's one to watch out for as well on the defensive line. Let's get my guy Holly in here, and then we'll talk about some more recruits. But, yeah, bring him on, Harlan. Let's roll.
What's going on, my man? How are you today, DJ?
I'm good, bro. How are you?
I'm good. It's good to finally be on the family channel, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no doubt.
I'm over here battling every week. It's good to be on the family channel.
Yeah, no, tell people, well, let's do this. Let's jump right into it. We'll keep going on recruiting, and I'll let you kind of introduce yourself. We'll let them judge you before we tell them where they can find you and everything else like that.
Fair enough.
Okay, so you work with a bunch of Gators over at High Top. You guys really do a good job, though. You guys' growth has been pretty impressive. I know that you guys bust it and work hard, so shout out to you guys for capitalizing on what you do. But my next recruit, I don't know if you kind of heard me rambling about some of the guys that I think we're in a good spot for, but the next one's the big one that a lot of people ask about and a lot of people want to know about. And so I'll make you be the bad guy or the good guy here.
Okay.
Is it safe to say that it is safe to say, this is the truth. 3 fan bases in the state of Florida feel really, really good about a kid that's committed to Ohio State right now at a position that Ohio State develops better than anyone else in the country. Feel as good as you can, right? Like, I don't think anybody thinks like a flip is imminent or, hey, we're this close to getting Jeremiah Smith or anything like that. But okay, so let's look at UF's perspective. You work with the UF guys, you hear this all the time. UF really feels good about where they stand with Jeremiah Smith, and what are your thoughts about that?
So UF feels that they're in a good spot for everybody at this point. I mean, they've got good momentum. They've been in the right place at the right time, in a couple of different scenarios with recruits that, look, quite honestly, I was surprised by. So I think Florida's current situation is giving them more confidence than I think they really should have in the Jeremiah the conversation. But look, the scary part is they've got a ton of momentum, and if they continue to do what they're doing right now, everybody at FSU who's been doing some saber rattling with our top 5 class should probably be a little concerned, because regardless of what happens down the road, we play them every year. we still got to play them. So yeah, I mean, look, that's the one piece of what's happening in Florida and Florida recruiting that I think is the biggest one. And those guys should feel confident. They've had a good run. I wouldn't if I were them, but that's just my personal opinion.
They have done better than expected on the trail right now, and I don't know if you have a massive take here or not, but they're doing a good job with the results on the field. And, Miami has struggled a little bit this year, and they've pointed to the fact that, hey, well, our results on the field weren't very good, so it's going to take kids time to buy in and trust. Listen, I'm not trying to get you in trouble with working with a bunch of Gators, but I'm about to. If you had to assign a percentage, right, what percentage of it is because I think it's somewhat these two things, but what percentage of it is Billy Napier is just really, really good at convincing kids to buy in and trust the process and, do a great job of trusting that we will get back, and what percentage of it is they have a very robust NIL?
Look, I mean, I think that part of it is just the newness of it, right? Napier came in and he's got to install his own system. Now, that being said, I don't know how robust that NIL is. I mean, they're switching over from one NIL to another. The last guy that was running their NIL, if I'm not mistaken, was just drunker than shit on Twitter Spaces. He couldn't keep his mouth shut. But that being said, I think that it's 50-50. I think that Florida has money. Florida's willing to spend money on the football program, and they have a new coach. I think those things combined will give them momentum in recruiting. What I've been saying to the Florida guys is you got to start winning games. If you don't start winning games, none of this is going to matter. One, your NIL money is going to start to decline little by little, or your players are going to see that this isn't really where this is the right spot to go. And the other part of it is, Napier is not impervious to one of those 3 and done, 4 and done. If they don't produce, if they don't come out this year, and it's a difficult schedule for them, if they don't look good, well, then Napier's gone. or could be on the hinge of it. The other part of it, obviously, the money, where if they don't feel like the money is being invested well enough, then they just will stop getting money.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to keep putting money into something if you're not at least winning, right? But yeah, I mean, I kind of agree on Napier, and I think he's certainly got his work cut out for him. Where, they've got a very difficult schedule this year. They've got an even more difficult schedule next year. But at the same time, 75 to 80% of the roster is his this year. And next year, it's going to be like 95% of the roster. And so it's still UF, right? Like, as much as we want to clown them and everything else, like, they shouldn't be in dogfights with South Carolina. They shouldn't be in dogfights with Kentucky or Missouri or any of these teams. I mean, you lose to Georgia, you lose to LSU, you lose to Florida State. I mean, I don't want to say that's acceptable, but that's fine, right? Like, it's like us losing to Miami or Clemson or Florida, But, yeah, the losing to Vandy, the losing to Missouri, the losing to Kentucky, that's what gets you fired, right? Like, that's what's just unacceptable. So, okay, so if he doesn't – so back to Jeremiah Smith, which we talked about for a little bit. If he doesn't commit to Ohio State, who do you like?
Oh boy, that's put me on the spot there, man.
It doesn't sign with Ohio State.
I know who it's not.
Committed.
Yeah, I know who it's not. I know it's not Florida. If it's not Florida, if it's not Ohio State, then I think it's Florida State. I mean, I don't know where else he really feels a home. I know JoJo Trader is sitting down there in Coral Gables as a commit. I don't know how long they can keep him. And those guys are on the same team. Look, I would say right now that Florida State is the second dog in the run. And if he does not end up at Ohio State, I don't see why Florida State isn't the next spot for him.
Yeah. I did a video, or maybe it was just a segment on a live about just kind of the race to second and what I thought the race to second would mean. And some people just didn't, that went over some people's heads big time. But I do think it's true. I mean, I agree with you. I think Florida has some reason to feel good. I mean, they kind of feel like, oh, well, he's got a good relationship with Lagway or this and that and the other. And I get that. And Florida's done a good, I mean, I think Billy Gonzalez is a good coach. He's coached an insane, kind of track record of wide receivers. But yeah, I think their confidence is a little off. And I don't, I think if it's not them, if it's not Ohio State, I think it's us. I'm kind of right there with you. So, a recruit that I do feel good about Florida for right now, and not as good for Florida State, although I heard some things this week that maybe caused me to question that, is LJ McCray. I think that Florida has done a really good job there. Obviously, somewhat close being in Daytona. It's close to everywhere in Florida, but certainly closer to Gainesville than Tallahassee. There's some questions around whether or not he's a take at UGA, and if he's a take at UGA, I actually think he ends up there, but I do think Florida's a little bit ahead in the LJ McCray recruitment. Florida State kind of has the ace up their sleeve of having an official visit in October, but your Gator buddies feel pretty good about LJ McCray right now?
They like a lot of what they're hearing from their side of the camp on LJ McCray. And to be honest, I mean, a lot of it's hearsay, right? I'm talking to those guys. They're kind of giving me the feedback on what they're hearing from their side of things. It just feels like LJ McCray is more of a I don't want to say a Gator lock. It just feels like he's a Gator commit silently while he's exploring his other options.
Yeah.
and everybody's on the outside kind of looking in. But that's just me. That's just what I'm hearing from their side of things.
Yeah, that's my vibe as well. I almost think about it, and this is not a perfect comparison, but I almost think about it in terms of like the old NCAA video game when you would be like 3,000 points, like say Florida State's like 3,000 points behind Florida, and you've got this official visit coming up where you could just absolutely knock it out of the park. But like the most you could theoretically do on an official visit is like 2,500. So you're still, even if you absolutely knock it out of the park, like Florida's just got such a big lead. And I'd love to be wrong there. Like Let's say you get 3,500 points in that official visit, right? Just kind of trying to compare it. But I just think Florida's lead is so big there that you'd almost need some other stuff to happen. Like you need him to, he's only about an hour away. So getting him to show up in Orlando for the LSU game might whittle some of that down. You get him to come on campus for another game that's not his official visit, might kind of whittle that down a little more. And Florida maybe has a bad year, maybe that whittles it down some more, and then you have your official visit and you maybe you pull them or whatever. But I think Florida State needs a few things to kind of go in their way to pick up McCray. I think that's a tough one.
Agreed. Yep.
One other flip option that we haven't talked about yet is Jason Zandamela. Zandamela over at USC right now as a commit. Kid plays down in Clearwater. Already flipped ITT. I've heard some things, and we've kind of talked about this a little in the Discord here and there, but I've heard some things about communication picking up there between Florida State and Zandamela. Not that it ever really died off, but I think the Noles have a good chance to get back in there. If they're able to pull Zandamela and you pair that with ITT, you pair that with Jonathan Daniels, you pair that with Ty Hilton, who all of the big three were really in on and wanted to try and get, Alex Atkins kind of does it again. Now, I like the offensive line class, even if they don't flip him back. But if they're able to flip two from Ohio, or USC and pick up Zandamela too, we're talking about one of the better offensive line pulls in the country.
Yeah, the Zandamela thing actually kind of surprised me. I'm not going to lie. I mean, he was heavily involved, and FSU was, involved in his recruiting. He went out to USC and almost like a TT, he came back with a USC commitment, and it just kind of felt surprising. Like I don't know. I was under the impression that we were in the lead for him in his commitment prior to that visit at USC, and then to kind of to see that commitment happen, I was a little thrown back. Look, I love the fact that the coaches haven't disengaged or just not stopped recruiting the kid. That tells me something there. I think we all know what we have at FSU in Alex Atkins in regards to just the ability for him to develop talent and things of that side of things. But I think what we're going to see here is, can Alex Atkins keep that relationship and continue to recruit? Big kid. I would love to see him anchor that offensive line at FSU. I don't think that recruitment's over at all whatsoever. Now, it'd be tough to get him from USC. It's not as if they don't have a couple of good guys that are recruiters from out there. But Zandamela is absolutely one that I think FSU is far from giving up on.
Yeah, continuing to trend. We got a question on, can Florida State finish with the number one overall recruiting class? I'm going to answer that as soon as I give some love to Garnet and Gold. Harlan, let's give them some love. GarnetandGold.com. Use code NOSLAW, NOSLAW, for all of the best in FSU athletic wear and gear. If you're looking for t-shirts, hoodies, jerseys, coaches polos, if you want the new shoes that have come out, make sure that you're ordering at GarnetandGold.com. 2 weeks and 2 days until kickoff against LSU. I ordered from Garnet and Gold on Tuesday. My package is literally out for delivery right now. That's Friday. That's 2 days later. 1 day processing, 1 day to ship, and it's to me the next day. Usually, if you're in the state of Florida, it is a pretty quick turnaround. So GarnetandGold.com, NOSLAW, NOSLAW, for 15% off. Harlan, you better go get your Garnet and Gold orders in. Harlan can just pick up in-store, though. If you're local to Tallahassee, you just go pick up in-store, save on the shipping. I've never not ordered. I got 5 people in my family, though, now, so I've never not ordered $75 or more and gotten the free shipping. But if you don't order that much, go pick it up in-store. Okay, can they get to the number one class? I don't mean to be the negative guy. I don't think it's possible. I think that when you look at how many guys Florida State's taken, how many guys that Georgia and others are taking, I think that it is feasible if you hit on just about everybody we just talked about. If you flip Smith, if you hit on Patterson, if you hit on Howard, if you flip Artavis Jones, if you flip Zandabella, if you pick up Booker Pickett, maybe you add one more in the class as well. I think it's feasible to finish 2. I think you're more likely to finish 3 or 4 in that scenario. 3 would be my guess at this point. What's crazy is if you landed every single person that I just mentioned, you'd have finished 4th last year. But last year's rankings were a little bit more bunched up. There were a little bit more 5 stars at the top. And so I think that's something to kind of monitor or think about. Like, oh, if you finish 4th, we had all these 5 stars and we finished 4th. Well, this year it might be 2nd, right? So I think you kind of judge that year over year. I really think that if you went out and kind of went on a run, your ceiling is probably 2nd or 3rd. Alabama hasn't drafted yet, so I think that's important to kind of keep in mind. But I think the floor for this class is probably like 5, 6. Say you don't flip Smith. Say that you miss on Patterson, but you hit on Howard. I don't see the Noles falling out of the top 5 or 6. Now, if they fall apart this year, have some big time decommit, that's one thing. But I think they finish around 5 or so. Holly, you want to step out on the ledge and say they can go number 1?
Oh, I could step out on that ledge all day as long as I know that there's something below it. I don't think that the number 1 class really is something that FSU has in their future. Now, I'm not saying that what the class that we have isn't one hell of a class, but I don't know if we're going to get past the Georgia threshold, even if Georgia continues to have a slap fight with Auburn and in Alabama with a couple of some of the kids that they have. But look, what I'm loving here is everybody told FSU that Mike Norvell couldn't recruit. He couldn't recruit the high school kids. He was the portal king, which he has been. But now we're recruiting at a high level. And look, if we're looking at a basement of 6th, 7th as a basement on the high school recruiting level, and then we're probably still going back into the portal to do what Mike Norvell does. Give me that all day.
Yeah.
All day.
It's hard to be upset with, you won 5 games 2 years ago, and you had the most embarrassing public decommitment flip of all time to follow that season up. And then you're talking just 2 years later, you have a top 5 class. I think it's hard to be upset with that. That will be the number 1 class in the ACC, I do believe, just based on numbers. Clemson always does a really good job, and that's fine. But you'll beat Miami there. You already probably have you already have it's you and Clemson than everybody else. Now, however you want to see the Clemson Florida State talent dynamic, I won't argue with you, but you've already got a gap between everybody else in the ACC, and if you pull in a top 5 class, your talent gap just gets that much wider. Now, hopefully, and maybe that's a good transition, we're not in the ACC for that much longer. So let's talk about that a little bit. Let's kind of get your thoughts on some conference realignment talk, kind of where things stand. I feel like, I've said this a couple of times, actually. I don't think I'm the best host. I don't think I have the best takes or anything like that. I do think we've done a good job with our conference realignment videos, and that's probably what I'm most proud of that we've done over the last year or so, even more than the recruiting stuff, which has been a lot of fun to follow. But so I'll let you go first here. Thoughts on this August 15th deadline that passed? Seems like that's going to lock us in for 2 more years, but are you thinking that's it? Are you thinking we're out shortly after that? Or what is your take on the ACC conference realignment and all of it?
So the one thing I can say is that the ACC and FSU have probably the worst divorce going on in the history of, we're talking Kardashian level divorces going on in public. You just don't see schools saber rattling this much without an idea as to where they're going to go, where they're going to be, who they think they're going to, and just all the other pieces. FSU has done an 100% amazing job of just staying ahead of this entire realignment thing, schools are dropping like flies, and conferences are drying up like they didn't exist a year ago. So what FSU has done here is different to me than what I've seen FSU's leadership in the past. I'll just put it out there. I do not believe that FSU is in the ACC in 2025. I just can't see all of this work, all of these analytics, all of these just basically pointing out to the ACC why the ACC is so bad that you expect to still be there beyond a year. Now, look, the deadline, I don't think that really mattered all that much, especially if it's an SEC situation, because you're just moving your rights from SEC to the SEC. So, look, at the end of the day, FSU will not be in the ACC in 2025. I don't know how the battle will go between the Big Ten and the SEC, but that's absolutely the two that are sitting there with the biggest gloves on. And I know for a fact that the SEC does not want to give us away to the Big Ten, who, by the way, is paying more money to their teams than what the SEC is now. And in my personal opinion, from what I can gather and what I can see from the outside looking in, I believe that Fox and what the Big Ten has done has a stronger long-term viability than what the SEC has right now with Disney and ESPN. So the FSU will be out soon.
Yeah, that's kind of my take too, is I really would have been excited about getting out before that deadline. Maybe first of all, just because I hate the ACC. Second, because it's fun to make content around it. Third, you just want to go, right? Like it's exciting when anything's new or whatever, and you just want to try something different. So, but I did hear some pretty obvious kind of like, oh, well, that makes sense for why it wasn't going to be 2024. First of all, the renovations in Doak, and don't necessarily know that you want to start an SEC or Big Ten run with like a third of your stadium, not usable. The SEC, which I've always felt it was the SEC, and we'll see, maybe it's the Big Ten, but the SEC 2024 schedules are already set, and I don't think they were willing to redo those for Florida State and Clemson. I mean, not that they wouldn't be able to, like if they could get Florida State and Clemson for free, but they've already they stuck with the 8-game schedule for 2024. I don't think they want to go away from that yet. I do think that if Florida State and Clemson come in 2025, you will see them go to the 9-game schedule. So I think that's part of it. And then, again, I think it just is something that takes time, right? Like, we all want to rush out right now, but as much as we want to get out today, if I would have told you, 2 months ago that we just have 2023 and 2024 left and we're out, I think that's something that we all would have taken. Florida State plays in Ireland in 2024. I was told that was going to be happening no matter what. I also think that you have the game at Notre Dame in 2024. I think you want to keep that if you can. I mean, that's a premier game that I think you're pitching to recruits and stuff like that. That's part of the ACC deal. Again, not that you would mind any one of these things, but the sum of all of them, Ireland, Notre Dame, the renovations, the SEC schedule, the buyout, the reduction of right. If you wait 2 more years, everything and money comes down slightly. You're talking $100 million over, $50 to $75 million probably over a couple of years. So I think all of that helps and kind of makes sense. But I'm with you. The deadline is passed. I believe that 2024, 2025, 2023, 2024 will be our last 2 years in the ACC. I think 2025 will be out. I've heard some rumblings that I don't know that I necessarily agree. They're certainly not anything that I'm willing to put my name on or stick my neck out there for, but I have heard some of the rumblings, some of the rumors that say if it was the SEC, they could get us out earlier. If it was the Big Ten, we could sue and get out earlier. Maybe. I still think it's just 2025. I think it also sets up well for the Noles to maybe be in the ACC one more year with a 12-team playoff. You're losing a lot of production this year, and I'm not necessarily scared because I'd take 9-3 in the SEC over 10-2 in the ACC. I mean, that's fine, but you lose Jordan Travis, you lose Jared Verse, you lose Lovett, you lose Wilson, you lose Coleman, you lose some offensive linemen, you lose Cypress, you lose Dent, you lose both linebackers. Maybe it's not the worst idea to spend 2024. I still think you make the playoff. I think right now, I mean, there's a lot between now and then, but if you ask me right now, does Florida State make a 12-team playoff in 2024, even with their losing? I think the answer to that is yes, because I think Florida State's going to start the year in the top 10. They're going to have a good year this year, start next year in the top 10. And if you start in the top 10 and go 9-3, you finish in the top 12. Like, that's just how it works. So 2025, me. I think that's kind of where I'm feeling, where I'm vibing. And then if you had to predict today, are you thinking SEC or Big Ten?
Right now, I would say SEC, just simply because the way the SEC's 2024 schedule is already kind of locked in. They don't have the dates, but they have the opponents already set, school for school. There was a deadline for us to declare, meaning that we wanted to be somewhere else. I think the Big Ten had a little bit of a back against the wall mentality on whether or not they were going to try to get us. And the fact that deadline passed, I'm feeling more and more that that's because FSU to the SEC makes the most sense.
Yeah, it seemed like there was a chance they could get to the Big Ten. If it was going to happen sooner, it was going to be the Big Ten. I think the delay points towards the SEC. I agree with you on some things. I think that more long-term stability, the Big Ten could be that conference. I talked about this too, not to rehash an old point, but I think if you really looked at like what the Big Ten would be with Clemson and Florida State and potentially Notre Dame someday, I think that's every bit pound for pound as good, if not better than the SEC. The SEC gets especially from a brand perspective, you'd be talking about Ohio State, Michigan, Notre Dame, Florida State, Clemson, USC. Your seventh best team is maybe like Penn State, Nebraska, still really powerful brands. And I know the SEC has Alabama, Georgia, LSU, Oklahoma, Texas, Florida is probably like, around 6 or so. But then from there, I don't know that they have a lot of national brands, right? Is A&M a national brand? Is Tennessee a national brand? Auburn, South Carolina, Missouri? I think we're out of them, right? And so, then you add in like Oregon and Washington, potentially the Big Ten, who, again, maybe pound for pound, you go all the way down to the bottom. You'd say Vandy's better than Rutgers. Okay, I'll give you that. But I think the Big Ten, if they were able to get Florida State, Clemson, and Notre Dame, would probably be better than the SEC at that point, or at very worst, it'd be even, right? And we're giving a lot of recency bias to Georgia by even putting them as high as we are, because 10 years ago, Georgia was just another SEC team, right? Like they weren't competing for things, yeah. And so, I think that's my take. Now, Florida State and Clemson go to the SEC. I think you've got 18 of the last 20 national championships. That is, the SEC locks it up as being the unquestioned best. It doesn't matter what happens with Notre Dame. The SEC is the unquestioned best conference of the Big Two. But that's kind of to me, that's the play for the Big Ten is go get Florida State, Clemson. You're eventually going to get Notre Dame, I would think, and you're the best conference. You've won up the SEC, or at the very worst, pulled even.
Yeah, absolutely. And just the fact that the way that Notre Dame has postured themselves throughout this entire process is amazing to me that they feel that they have such a strong draw in being able to have like a half vote at the ACC, but yet trying to dictate the way that the conference as a whole goes. Like it's very, very Notre Dame is a wild card that's just out there. But yeah, to your point, look, you put FSU, Clemson, Notre Dame in the same conference on a consistent basis, and just from a national brand recognition, you can make something work, right? Like the SEC has, Vandy, Kentucky, a bunch of teams out there that even regionally don't even get the majority of the set of eyeballs. Like, Kentucky has to fight with Louisville. Vandy has to fight with Tennessee. So there's a little bit of inbreeding involved, and no pun intended, with the SEC. But I mean, look, if you were to take somebody like a Clemson and FSU and Notre Dame, and they could feasibly make their own way on their own, like just the concept based on just those teams.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see for sure. All right, let me give some love to Gramco, and then we'll talk a little bit about fall camp. We'll wrap up with some LSU talk, and then we'll get out of here. So thegramco.com, go get your both Delta 8 and Delta 9 gummies. I think they have even CBD gummies. So if you want to take it down in a level even lower and you don't want the, we'll say, effects, go to thegramco.com, use TJ25 for 25% off at checkout. They will be out there with us for the tailgate in 2 weeks and 2 days. You can get tailgate tickets in the description at eventbrite.com if you haven't already. But thegramco.com, enjoy them. Always have a great time. Working on some hemp seltzers to have out there for you guys for the tailgate. So you guys will be nice and mellow going to the game. So we'll enjoy that. Thegramco.com, TJ25 at checkout. All right, fall camp. Holly, I don't know. This fall camp to me is the most like a NFL preseason that I've ever seen. I think that I've been told that some of these guys like coming back this year, that was part of like their coming back deal, was like, hey, we're not going to beat the heck out of you in fall camp. Like, we are going to, you're not going to go take 800 reps out there in the middle of, like, kind of the Brady treatment, right? Kind of the, hey, we're going to go out and beat everybody's butt this year. You're going to be in shape. We're going to bust your butt during tour of duty and summer workouts and stuff, but we ain't risking injury, contact or non-contact in fall camp. Right now, Florida State relatively healthy, I would say, in fall camp. You want to knock on wood anytime you say that, but relatively healthy in fall camp. But really an opportunity for them to give as much possible, reps and experience to some of the backup guys that, a lot of places aren't able to offer. So anyway, all that said, thoughts on fall camp?
Well, the one thing I will say is if you put FSU's starting 22, the 11 on offense, the 11 on defense, you put those up against just about any team, and I feel confident all the way up to the Georgia level that we can be competitive. Now, where I start to get worried is depth, right? So if that's the case, and I think I'm not the only one thinking that, like the defensive line is 4 deep, but the linebackers aren't, and the secondary isn't. So if I'm looking at the way I need to put my team on the field to be successful, especially considering who I know I have and the experience they have, why? What's the point of putting them out there and what are you going to run gassers for 4 straight days? So no, go out there, let these guys get their reps, let them stay in shape. Let's keep the defensive line, even though we've had a couple of hits already. Let's keep that defensive line fresh. I don't want any of them walking into the LSU game the slightest bit nicked up. We know who we have at the offensive side of the ball. I mean, I think we want to see a little bit more out of the offensive line, but I don't care about seeing Jaheim Bell, run 80 routes in practice. Give us the guys that we know on a straight 11 versus 11 basis. Give me those guys. And if that's how we're going to do this, and we're going to go into this with a load management type of scenario, that's ideal. So in my opinion, that's how you take a team that is this talented to start the season against a top 5 team. I don't need to see him work. I need to see him win. That's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, no, I'm right on with you, and I think you're spot on. Really interesting question from, I assume, an SEC fan that we'll get to in the comments in just a second. So I do want to earmark that and come back to it. But I want to talk about Jared Verse and Fabian Lovett for just a minute. I know there's been concerns and questions about Verse. I think Jared Verse is good to go. I've spoken with multiple people over the last week. I know that he's been in a non-contact injury. I think that has to do with a little bit about what we're talking about here on just load management, reps, and things like that. I know he was out last week. I don't think that that's from everyone I spoke with, that's nothing to worry about. I've actually been told that it was it wasn't anything physical, like a nick or a bump or bruise or anything like that. So I'm trying to be somewhat careful with what we're saying, but again, I'll just kind of preface that with just saying I think that Florida State, feels really good about where Jared Verse is. The concern that I had is around Fabian Lovett, and even some of that has started to dissipate. A couple of people that I spoke with close to the program, I believe that they feel pretty good about where Fabo is and where he is going to be this fall, and what's coming. Him being ready, him being available is something that I'll say I didn't have a ton of confidence in, but something that I definitely have more confidence in now as we are getting closer and just kind of as we are moving toward the season. I think Fabo's been a little more active in fall camp. I don't think it's been insane by any means. I think they are trying to let that foot heal up, but I do feel better about where both of those guys are. There was a little bit of concern around Kentron. I saw him out at practice, and so I feel better there. I do think that there have been some injuries to some guys further down on the depth chart. We've mentioned some of that in our Discord, so maybe a small plug there. Go check that out if you're not part of it. But nobody in the two deep that I'm super concerned about. I think it's, you've got some younger guys. In fall camp, injuries suck no matter when they happen. You've got maybe a wide receiver that is, in maybe your second best grouping of wide receivers, like 4 or 5 down on the depth chart. But then outside of that, I feel like Florida State's really, really healthy. They're really in a good spot. You've got about a week left of fall camp. So let's hope that that's the case for this last week of fall camp, and let's get out pretty injury-free. So, Holly, any thoughts on that? Or I want to get to this SEC question here that this guy has. Up to you.
No thoughts on that. I think what we're doing right now is the path and trajectory that I would hope we stuck to. Obviously, Norvell knows the roster better than we do. I expect Fabo to be Fabo, always a little dinged up, but I expect Verse to be fine, and I would prefer that I don't see Fabo run reps as opposed to being ready for LSU. Given the alternative.
Nope, completely agree there. Again, NFL preseason camp, this type thing. Okay, we got a comment about when I quickly said I'd rather be 9-3 in the SEC over 10-2 in the ACC. They said that we would not even we'd be lucky to have a winning record. All right, get Daryl off the screen. He's not allowed to stay up there. We're being a hater. But I wanted to pull up Florida's schedule, and I'm a homer, but I'm going to try and be as realistic as I can with this. So let's go through it. Let's talk about it. Let's kind of see. Florida has Miami to open up the schedule, and that's a home game. Now, I know Florida State plays Miami at home this year, but I'm going to put ourselves in Florida's shoes and go through this schedule. Florida opens up with Miami next year at home. I'm just going to tell you, I usually think that Miami is a coin flip game, and I usually just go with a home team. So I think it's safe to say that Florida State would win that game, right? Anything could happen in a rivalry, but if you like Florida in that game, you certainly like Florida State, especially with how you think that both programs are trending. So I'll go 1-0 for the Noles there. You also play UCF. You also play Florida. And you play Samford. I'm going 4-0 in those games, right? I don't, maybe a little bullish. Maybe it's 3-1. Maybe one of the rivals gets you, but I think you're 3-1 at worst, 4-0 at best. Is that fair?
Oh, I would agree with that. wholeheartedly. You certainly can't lose to UCF.
Yeah.
Samford is a non-starter. And then maybe you split the real rival.
Split with your rivals, 3-1 at worst. Okay, you played Georgia. Let's just, for the sake of argument, say you lose that game. Like, you lose to Georgia, right? I think that's fair. I think, nobody in the country is picking their team heads up against Georgia, so that's fair. The rest of the schedule, though, Kentucky at home. That doesn't really worry me. I think that's a win for Florida State. LSU at home, I don't know.
We play them now.
Yeah.
We played them back to back at this point.
Yeah.
It's
So
not scary to me.
Worst case, that's a coin flip. So we've got LSU as a coin flip. We're looking at Florida's 2024 schedule because it said we wouldn't have a winning record. Okay. You look at Ole Miss, you look at A&M, Mississippi State, Tennessee, and Texas. Well, neither Mississippi school worries me at all. And so I'm going to count that as 2 wins. Maybe you split with Tennessee and Texas A&M. And then at Texas, I think is tough. I think that's a program that's turning things around. But I think that what I just kind of told up was like 8-4 is realistic. Now, if you lose all your coin flips, you could maybe go 7-5. But again, out of conference, I think you're going 3-1 at worst. You're winning against both Mississippi teams, 5-1. Kentucky's another win, 6-1. And then if you just split your coin flips, I think you're 8-4. So I don't know. Anything I'm saying too egregious there?
No, I mean, as an FSU fan, I would much rather play Texas than Oklahoma in anything, in any sport. They just seem to have our number, unfortunately. But look, I don't think you're far off for exactly what you're saying here, right? You split the in-state rivalry. You think UCF and you don't lose the coin flip battles like an LSU and potentially I don't know, maybe in Arkansas, who maybe whoever else you mentioned. I just don't see FSU hemorrhaging losses on that schedule. So to say that FSU couldn't walk in and play an SEC schedule and feel confident about it, I'd be fine with it.
I think that when you look at the SEC in specific, the teams that like worry you, like the teams that are like, could we consistently beat these teams, are Alabama, Georgia right now. Oklahoma is fine, Texas maybe, but I think that's where you get to your next tier. I think it's Texas, LSU,
Tennessee,
Florida, Tennessee. Those are your games you'd probably be splitting more often than not.
Right.
So, yeah, LSU at home, but Florida plays LSU in the Swamp. So I was kind of counting that game happening in Doak. So, yeah, I think that you've got the idea of a couple, 2-3 teams that really worry you on an annual basis. If you ever had a schedule that had Georgia, Alabama, and Oklahoma on it all the same year, yeah, that could be trouble.
A little scary, yeah. But then like the Ole Miss pops up every once in a while. You're not that worried about it. It's just Ole Miss on the schedule. Arkansas,
Missouri.
It's like more out of the. Missouri is almost like, I don't want to, dump on Missouri, but I don't feel like Florida as a team should struggle as much with Missouri as they have. They've just kind of been fair, and there's no reason to think that FSU couldn't stay above competitive with any of those other teams.
Yeah, South Carolina, Vandy, Kentucky.
Right.
I think Kentucky does good things at times, but come on, I don't. None of these teams worry me. Again, if there was ever a doomsday scenario where and this probably would never happen because they understand scheduling and competitive balance, but if you ever had Oklahoma, LSU, Florida, Georgia, and Alabama on your schedule, yeah, that could be really, really tough. But I still think you probably pull 2 of those wins out. And if you go 2-3 and then beat the teams you're supposed to beat, That's all that it takes, you know.
Well,
I
isn't that
mean,
how the SEC works? Like you just win two of the games that two out of the five hard games, and you're automatically a top 10 team.
yeah, this
I thought
idea
that's
that
how.
like every week is a battle when you've got Mississippi State and Ole Miss and
Right.
Vandy and South Carolina on your schedule is ridiculous. And as much as we like to give Florida crap, it is ridiculous that Florida struggles with any of those teams. And the only reason they do is because they're not taking care of their business. They're not, they're not in the
For
position
sure.
that they should be in. And so I don't know. I think it's kind of funny to see, but
If FSU had the money and the resources that Florida has had over the last 20 years, it would be amazing to see what FSU can do.
without
Like
a
we've
doubt,
been literally getting by just any way, shape, or form that we could with the money that we had. The fact that Florida, right down the road, hasn't been more successful with the amount of resources that have been given to them is surprisingly underwhelming.
yeah, Florida State has certainly done more with less for a long time. And I think that's why Florida fans are so worried about Florida State getting into a real conference. I mean, they do not want Florida State in the SEC or the Big Ten. And
I think it
they
scares
can
the hell out of
say
them.
they can say it's for whatever reasons, but yeah, the fact that Florida State in the same span has the same, or in a much shorter span as far as big time programs go, but in a much shorter span has the same number of national titles, the same number of Heisman Trophy winners, more bowl victories, more top 10 finishes, more AP #1 ranking, like all of those things says something, right? And so I think that Florida State has also found ways to have success over multiple periods, where Florida just had like a really nice, like, I don't know, 15 or so year run from the mid 90s to the late 2000s. Not trying to take away too much from them, but yeah, I understand why they don't want us in the SEC or the Big Ten. It actually makes a lot of sense. So, all right. We're a little over an hour. Holly, tell these people where they can find you more, where they can find your work, what you do, and all the rest of that.
Guys, we have a channel that is college football, sports all day, every day. That's all we really talk about. It's High Top Sports. You can find it just by going into YouTube and Googling up High Top Sports. Look, but we're just as passionate about the sport as TJ and everybody here at Double Fries. So look, guys, if you're just in the middle of it and you want to see what else is out there, let's just talk college football. Maybe like we can spend all day doing it. So High Top Sports, Holly, and trust me, there's if you want to get into a battle, there's a Discord. Harlan has been a part of it for a minute, and he has gone up against about a 90 to 10 ratio of Florida to Florida State fans. So come on over, help me out, help me out.
The Harlan got to run his victory laps when KJ Bolden committed, so I think that won't be the last time that he gets to run victory laps. I know that he'll have a fully charged phone the last Saturday night in November as well to have some fun at their expense. So Holly, thank you for hanging out. Everybody that hung out in the chat today, all the comments, all the super chats, all the love, all the Venmo, PayPal, whatever you guys sent, appreciate that a ton. You guys rock. We'll be back. We might have more content unexpected coming later today, later tomorrow, something like that. So check us out. We'll be back on Sunday for another live video with me and Richie. We'll try and keep you guys updated in between now and then. But thank you guys for hanging. Go Noles.
Fight for FSU.